Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution, and I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And your co-host Rich Gear here as well. And Doug, we're being very up to date on stuff that's going on, new developments. I see you had Mars behind you, and we're going to talk about that today, right?
We're going to talk about the potential of life on Mars.
Yes.
There was an article in a news feed I got just about a week ago. It's called Mars Rock Hints at Life. And so what we're talking about is there's NASA's Perseverance rover that was let out on Mars, and they were pointing to signs of life on Mars, and that's what they found some minerals that they thought could only form in the presence of life. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit and the
Okay.
problems with that. And so, first of all, I want to make sure we understand what the goals of this mission was. It says the goals of the mission are to explore the Jezero Crater landing site and its surroundings, constrain the geological history and habitability of the site, seek signs of past life, prepare a cache of samples for potential return to Earth. Perseverance rover carries an instrument payload designed to fulfill these goals with the capability to characterize rock targets, their sub-millimeter scale textural attributes, and potential organic and inorganic biosignatures, placing these features in an outcrop scale context. And so they found an outcrop of rock in this crater, which was most likely an impact crater. Craters are either formed by impact or by volcanic activity.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we take a look at. And so I'll show you the little, I'm going to share my screen here a little bit because this helps us to understand what we're looking at. This is something that they actually put out in one of the articles talking about this article. And it says there's what's called a cold scale. And this is what helps you to verify that the scientific accuracy in determining whether or not life actually exists on Mars. And so what they did was down at the bottom is the least possible to the most possible, and then at the bottom it says you detect the possible signal. Let's make this bigger here. Then number 2 is you rule out contamination. Number 3 is you make sure the biology is possible. And number 4, you rule out non-biology. And then you have to find an additional independent signal from the first one, rule out other hypotheses, and then you have independent confirmation. And so, according to this article, this scale is what helps you to build up to the conclusion that life may exist on the other planet. Now, this was a little snippet that I got from the 1440 news feed that I had, and it said that they were looking for this possible past signs of past life on Mars, and they've been exploring the Jezero Crater, which, according to billions of years ago, was believed to be a lake bed. And then they found a rock formation speckled with dots resembling poppy seeds and leopard spots. The colorful patterns indicate the presence of vivianite and greigite, two minerals rich in iron, phosphate, and sulfide that on Earth has been produced through biological activity. Researchers found no evidence that the minerals were produced through heat, an alternative theory.
So in other words, Doug, let me stop you right there. Can those minerals, are they saying that these minerals only are produced with life activity, or that is one of the ways that they're produced. Does it say that?
Well, they said that there's an alternate theory that they had was produced through heat.
Well, they
But
ruled that out, but are there other things as well possibly that could produce it,
yeah,
you know?
I don't think that they have actually explored all the alternative
Okay, fair enough.
explanation for these minerals. Okay, and NASA's effort to retrieve and further study the samples is stalled until at least the 2040s due to
Oh,
costs now estimated at 11 billion. This is your tax money at work, my friends. So
yeah, because yeah, their agenda
interesting.
has always been to find life somewhere else to prove that we are not unique in the heavenlies, according to like what the biblical record seems to indicate. Doesn't seem to indicate it. It pretty much explicitly tells us that we are made in His image and we are special creations, and there's nothing else like us in the known universe or the unknown universe, in the physical universe, if you will. Okay, there are other beings out there, but we call them angels and cherubim and seraphim and living creatures, but these are not really in the physical universe as far as I'm aware, unless they come in. But they're trying to find physical signs or signs of physical life which would preclude the biblical narrative. I believe this is the agenda of it. And I'm going, this, like you said, this is your tax dollars at work, because this is what they do, or what the evolutionary lobbies have been trying to do for years. This is what SETI was all about, trying to find
Mhm.
outer space aliens and extraterrestrial life. It's what they're trying to find. Well, they trying to explain why there's water in other places, water on Mars and other places, because water is necessary for life, physical life. And so all of these things now, and don't you remember the moon rock? Was it the moon rock, what, a decade ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was?
The
And
Mars rock found in Antarctica, right?
yeah, yeah. And that finally got discounted. But luckily that it was only a couple of years later. But even so, what I find out, Doug, is the evolutionary lobby is so desperate for proof that God does not exist or that life can spontaneously arise. They go after any kind of a scenario that's even remotely. I mean, and to me, it stretches credibility to the nth degree as far as I'm concerned. When I look at this stuff, I go like they went from step number one, they find a signal, and they jumped already past the other six steps on top, and they jumped to like point eight, and then the article comes out and says there's possible life that was on Mars,
Right.
and right now all we see in Mars is a sterile planet, and from all the things we can look at in the present. So again, they're trying to extrapolate in the past something they've never been able to see, and they won't be able to prove. And they basically ignored other scenarios that could have produced the vivianite and greigite or greigite. How do you pronounce that?
Great
Greigite?
guy. I think
Greigite. Okay.
yeah, it's
Um,
interesting. I have over here, it has a chemical formula for vivianite, which is basically an iron phosphate. Then there's other derivatives of it, which is phosphorite and metavivianite and ferrostrunzite and Santa Barbarite. And basically, they're all uh, iron phosphates. Now, this is a fairly simple inorganic compound that is found in these minerals, and so I'm not surprised that you're going to find these. But it's a stretch in my mind to say that these are things that are formed only if life is present. I guess the idea is that they seem to form around decaying vegetation or something like that. And so
okay.
of course, what they have not found is any organic molecules like amino acids or nucleotides or proteins or anything of that sort that would
Yeah,
indicate.
you find. I was telling you earlier, Doug. I said, we were talking about this earlier today, but yeah, if you found some left-handed amino acids, well, we might have a little bit of a case there. But no, nothing like that's even remotely found.
No,
This seems.
these are inorganic compounds that they found in this, and it's a stretch up this. little scale that they have here to go from this one thing that they think is a possible signal, but it's an organic compound, and so it's not something that life, no other
Right.
evidence for life exists. Now, here's what we have to understand about the production of life on Mars and what you have to think about. First of all, the climate on Mars is really not very amenable to have life exist because the average temperature is like a minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it's hostile. It's hostile to life as we
And
know it.
the temperatures can work vary widely, ranging from 195 degrees Fahrenheit at the poles during the winter to 70 degrees at the equator during the summer days. You do get um, some vestiges of warm temperatures, and then the thin atmospheres contributes to rapid temperature swings.
Yeah.
And dust storms can raise surface temperatures by trapping heat, but the seasonal changes affect temperatures, thermal conditions in the summer months. Mars lacks a significant greenhouse effect, which leads to colder overall temperatures compared to Earth. So the fact that the cold temperatures go way down below, uh, back 80 degrees below zero, that is a hostile environment to produce life. Uh,
Yeah.
and so they hold out hope that they will find life on Mars, but the question is, have they found any uh, organic compounds, especially of the complex type that make up life? Now, what I would challenge them to find would be some chlorophyll and or hemoglobin. We talked about
Yeah.
this in an earlier show, is that the chemical pathway to produce both chlorophyll and hemoglobin are pretty much similar, except for the ending part of the pathway where it has a heme group that is surrounded, as an iron molecule surrounded by porphyrins. But in the chlorophyll, the porphyrins are capturing a magnesium molecule,
Right. Right. Yeah.
magnesium atom, and so that is the difference. And then there's some side chains on the chlorophyll that are different. But one is used for trapping the carbon dioxide. The chlorophyll traps the carbon dioxide, fixes it, and makes organic compounds out of it in the plants. Whereas in the animals, you have hemoglobin, which transports oxygen to the biochemical pathways.
Okay.
So
Well, so that's again that those are our organic compounds, correct, Doug?
yeah, that's what you find on life on the Earth is that is an essential part of the created uh, of God's creation that shows us that there's an intelligent designer behind the whole biochemical pathway. We don't find any of this on Mars. And but the most likely problem is that people are not who fund these expeditions to Mars, are blind to the alternative explanation that there was no life on Mars. And so they keep trying to find some evidence that life may have existed billions of years ago on Mars. And so when you put it back in the far in the past, so that you can try to make the argument that there once was life out there, but the whole evidence for it disappeared over the billions of years, and here's the only evidence that you have left is vivianite and greigite, and that's in my mind extremely weak argument for life. yet they need to justify funding for their research. And so this is a big deal for them to find something, some hint that there might have been life in the past.
I'm
I
sorry.
also find it interesting that they try to find life on Europa or Ganymede or
Yes.
Enceladus and Saturn, Titan. They hint that some of the things that they find on these planetoids are evidence that life may exist out there in outer space. But we have a Earth that is fine-tuned for life here, and it is not fine-tuned on Mars.
Yeah, in fact, it's been a while since I've looked at. Remember that there's a that very famous article or something. They talk about all the fine tuning for Earth. That we're just the right distance from the sun. Not too close, too far away. Where there's so many factors that make this planet unique, and it is unique. I mean, in all the things we see, as I say, everything they go. I've always been astounded that Mars. They postulate a planet that was covered in water, where there's no water really in evidence. If there is, it's very minimal. And you had a planet like Earth, which they consider, which is three-quarters covered with water, and then the land masses are three-quarters sedimentary rock, which is created by water action. They deny the fact there could have been a worldwide flood. It always astounds me, Doug. It's an unbelievable. It's that old expression, Doug. Your prejudice allows you what you can see. But the thing is, it also makes you see what isn't even true. You're prejudiced. That's what they're out here. This vivianite and greigite. It's like that's a paucity of evidence. It's not really. It has really very little substance. But the way the articles are written, it's like, oh my gosh. It also reminds me, Doug, about the life in the test tube experiments. And oh my gosh, they've created life in the test tube, and for years, you had to debate that. And sometimes, Doug, it always gets me. The reality is that you don't need to be truthful. You just need to convince people of the lie for 20, 30 years, then come up with another lie. And that's what it seems to me that happens a lot. Sometimes they aren't lies, perhaps they may be just deceptions. But either way, it serves their purpose. To me, it serves the enemy's purpose, and that's what it really is. This stuff that's just it's. We look at all the science, all the physical evidences and stuff, and it can be the creation. The creation scenario is much more plausible in every sense of the word, and yet, because they will not see or refuse to, they can only see the other side. They can only see, oh, there must have been life up here. There must have been water on Mars. There must have been, like you said, Europa and all these places. The possibility of like when you and I have gone on many shows, we've talked about water itself cannot help life at all. It'll destroy it from ever starting. Water is necessary for life, but it's unnecessary for the start of life.
Yeah, what you have to understand is if you're trying to bind two amino acids together, you have to remove a water molecule.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you remove the water molecule, then the two amino acids can stick together and make that peptide bond. But if you add water to the mixture, well, it quickly wants to disassociate and put that water back in, and it separates the two amino acids. And so then what you need to do is to take those two amino acids. Actually want to make it into an intelligent string that has a computer code, which is what which the enzymes are, and they have a specific purpose in the life, and they all have to be coordinated together. Typical protein might have 400 amino acids. And so to get them all left-handed, get them all in the right proper order, that actually has a meaning, like a sentence in a book. You have a uh, a real problem. The odds of that ever happening
Does
is
this all have to happen, Doug, without water? Water cannot be involved in all this process up to this point? Or
up
is
to
it water?
that point, you have to have it in a solid state synthesis. And so it has to be outside of the water and maybe in a clay or a mineral situation.
Okay.
But in order for it to function as an enzyme, it needs water
So,
as a completed protein. So it's a real problem. And then of course need um, enzymes to produce the DNA polymerase is an enzyme which makes the DNA. You have the DNA that codes the messenger RNA. And then there's ribosomal RNA and transfer RNA that are involved in the process of putting a protein together. And there are proteins involved in all these different reactions to catalyze them. And
man,
so
this
they all
this
need to be in place for life to exist on and to actually work. Uh, I want to read to you what it says in this study
okay.
about the vivianite. Okay, let me see if I can read this here. In the Bright Angel area, which they sort of name these places after the Grand Canyon stuff, the iron phosphate minerals are associated with organic matter. A pathway to the formation of vivianite is via the oxidation of this organic matter, which would have been coupled to the reductive dissolution of the ferric ion in sediment grains. This process would have liberated the ferrous ion and the phosphate to solution and precipitated the ferrous phosphate. Similar precipitation and redox reactions have been considered for occurrence uh, manganese-rich nodules in the Jezero Crater, and for sub-millimeter scale mixed valence of the iron phosphate grains in the conglomerate outcrop in the Jezero Western Fan. Sulfate reduction coupled to organic matter oxidation could also be responsible for the precipitation of iron sulfide, the Apollo Temple target, and the cores of reaction fronts in Cheshire Falls. As reduced iron uh, and the five-bearing phases formed the S-bearing phases formed of the phosphates, mudstone color properties were modified by iron reduction, bleaching it of as red color in proportion to the abundance of available organic matter.
Okay, Doug, you want
And
to
so,
simplify that for us? I'm thinking
okay,
like a little kid in a penis cartoon. I'm hearing all the words, but they're going wah, 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 wah. So can you
well,
simplify
yeah,
the play audience and for me?
well, that's part of the deception here is that they couch all this stuff in all this fancy scientific terms. But what you're seeing is that the iron phosphates, they're attributing the existence of them to organic matter.
Yeah, you were saying they were inorganic compounds, and weren't you
They
saying they
are
were?
inorganic compounds produced by organic matter. And so that's their claim is that this is the only way that these could have come about. And then that's prime evidence that there may have been life on Mars billions of years ago.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that, in my estimation, they also talk about that there's uh, other things that they think might have been. These are precipitates of inorganic compounds based upon their association with living creatures. And just because we find something like this maybe on Earth happening, doesn't mean that these minerals came about in this same manner. And they're fairly simple inorganic compounds. Um, Iron and phosphate is fairly commonplace, and we have not explored all the different possibilities of how that could have come about under
Okay.
certain conditions, and especially on Mars. We can't go back into time and reproduce the experiment that did it. They and so they have a lot of different things to prove, and so they're hoping that we can wait until 2040 to so that we can bring the samples back to Earth, then studying them a little bit further, and voila, you have life on Mars. And actually, at this point in time, you have that illusion that there was life on Mars at one point in time, and so you just have to believe that life could have evolved by chance without any help from God, and that's your
As I
conclusion.
said, Doug, they'll come out in 2040. They go, well, I guess this didn't really prove this. And then by that time, they've come up with another scenario. I think they've done this. The evolutionary lobby, the secularists, the naturalists, who will not allow a supernatural foot in the door, have done this since Darwin's day. And I still remember that the time. I mean, we talked about the Piltdown man, fraudulent for 40 years,
Mhm.
and they ruin a generation. They come up with a then when we were younger, they come up with the Mars rock until they proved it was not viable. Now they come up with this. It's still Mars is the one they default to when they have not got anything better. But I've always been real skeptical. They come up with these scenarios that pushes the kicks the can down the road for a few years until they come up with something else. And then they oh, but see, we're self-correcting. We admit our mistakes. Yeah, after you ruin a generation, after you convince a bunch of people with your propaganda, and every time you've come up with something, it's always been bogus. And it's been bogus one thing after down the road. And you, Doug, are already exposing the fact that that they say these are organic, and you know that they're inorganic. These are inorganic. They're not life things. They think they're a result of some organic processes, perhaps, but there's other scenarios that can produce this stuff all over the place. So this is a very weak scenario. But boy, I remember I read this article as well on what's this Mars, another Mars thing, and now you've kind of unraveled it for me, Doug. I appreciate that.
Well, you only have a few minutes, a minute left here, so just a few more thoughts. This is something that I think at the uh, pinnacle of this, on the top of that scale, is a lie that they're trying to show, and it is totally evil in my mind that they are trying to promote this as the this is the Tower of Babel of science. Here is to go to go to Mars and find life and to explain life without God. And
Yes, I
that is
amen.
a extremely evil goal that the NASA is using to do this. I like the fact that they're going to these planets
I
because
do too.
because
Absolutely.
they prove our point in many situations. So
Right.
that's my take on it, Rich. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.